Hello everyone, this guide is about AttackSpeed Azir. It is yet a rather unpopular playstyle of Azir and I want to explain it in details. The idea behind its playstyle is basically to optimize Azir's soldier DPS. DPS stands for damage per second and Azir is one of those rare DPS mages who's even capable of outrating other marksman champions. Here are some pros that AttackSpeed Azir has over the standard ability power carry Azir, who usually only stacks raw ability power. Azir's DPS potential is unmatched and this gets amplified by buying more attack speed. At the end, he is capable of dealing around 1600 damage per second. And this damage is magical, it is area of effect damage and it comes with a wide attack range for safety purpose. Because of this high DPS, it is also heavily recommended versus tanks that cannot withstand the rapid fire of piercing sand strikes. Even more so than APC Azir, and again highlighted by his DPS, the zone control he creates is much more threatening. Walking even close is very dangerous as AttackSpeed Azir needs only 1 or 2 seconds to deal tremendous damage. The combination of high attack speed and Azir's W Arise makes him one of the best turret takers in the game. With the addition of his pushing power and the safety his pocket turret can provide him, Azir works greatly as a split pushing threat. That's also why I like to run AttackSpeed Azir at top lane. Many times I was able to take several turrets as soon as my lane opponent walked away for a short moment. Similar to champions like Ziggs, also Azir can stall out games by just destroying minion waves from far away. And, it has to be mentioned, easier last hitting thanks to bonus attack speed. Like with all new champions, people were experimenting several crazy builds when the Birdman got released, but eventually the AP heavy builds became his standard build over time. The build for APC Azir usually consisted out of either a Morellus or an Ascent as the mana regeneration item, Nasa's Tooth, Zoxera Shoes, Void Staff, Rapidant's Death Cap and Sonya's Hourglass. Ability power was heavily favored over attack speed on Azir, for certain reasons of course. Around this time Azir still had the lowest base attack speed in the entire league, which made attack speed look very inferior on him. Nowadays his base attack speed got buffed to 0.625, which is a very healthy base. Most champions actually share the same attack speed base of 0.625. Furthermore, his sand soldiers were still hitting for 70% of his ability power, whereas today it is reduced to 60% of his ability power. It was a heavy nerf for his late game, where those lost 10% ability power ratio on his main source of damage income make a very big difference. It actually means 10 less damage for every 100 ability power, so for example 80 less damage per hit when you would have around 800 ability power in the late game. This obviously stacks up extremely quickly in Azir's case, as he just needs to auto-attack with his sand soldiers. However, with the introduction of Luden's Echo in the league, this item crystallized soon enough as being mandatory on pretty much every mage, including Azir as well. It replaced Nasa's Tooth in his APC build and people began to take cooldown reduction per level cliffs instead to reach the maximum cooldown reduction. Azir was and still is a ridiculous threat when it comes to sieging turrets down. It is the combination of his rather easy to apply poke damage from far away with one of his sand soldiers and his zone control. Within siege scenarios, Azir's zone control extends with the addition of his own turret. When a team starts to group in front of an enemy turret and tries to take it down, one major weakness of this strategy has always been to flank the sieging team from behind, from the side or with stealth champions. All of this weakness gets taken away as soon as Azir casts his own turret. The enemy is trapped in an uncomfortable situation, especially when Azir casts his turret in front of the enemy's tier 2 turret, where the distance is much shorter. Azir's composition is usually built around as being superior in poke wars, so they can pressure the enemies under their turret, but the enemies also cannot just hard engage without taking substantial damage from Azir's turret. Luden's Echo is an excellent item for this case, as its meaningful poke damage on top of Azir's spells enhances all the poking that is going on. However, this oppressive item got now heavily nerfed with the recent patch 5.11. This all said, the APC build just simply outshined all other possible builds that you could run on Azir, which I think is a shame. Azir's true power lies within his enormous teamfight DPS potential, which can make him look ridiculous overpowered. You don't tap into this DPS power at all if you build only raw AP. I believe if it comes down to superior poke or even burst damage, then there are much better options available, like for example Ziggs, Seraph or AP Kog'Maw. But Azir's optimized teamfighting DPS is a strength when no champion in the league can match him, and this attack speed build focuses on maximizing this DPS. Azir's Sand Soldiers are his extended basic attacks, and like all basic attacks in League of Legends, they scale with attack speed. Whenever you basic attack with one soldier, you deal magic damage equal to 60% of your ability power plus some base damage on top of it. This base damage scales with your champion level. This part represents how much damage his soldiers do per single hit. How many hits he can do per second is determined by the attack speed voucher. It is capped at 2.5 hits per second. The next multiplier shows how many of his Sand Soldiers are up at the moment. It is won by standard, and every additional soldier increases his DPS by 25%. Azir can have a total of 3 soldiers, which increase his DPS by 50%. All 3 parts multiplied together result in Azir's overall DPS he is capable of dishing out with his Sand Soldiers army. So I'm talking here about sustained damage. Sustained damage is what kills, well, it kills everything, but it's especially the tool that it's required to kill tanks, and guess what? We have a very tank-oriented meta at the moment. That's also why DPS mages like Azir, Cassiopeia, Vladimir and so on are so highly prioritized in competitive play. Now, looking back at his DPS formula, it is the first part with the AP multiplier that gets the most focus from a heavy ability power oriented build with items like Luden's Echo and Rabadon's Death Gap. This again results in rather slow but hard hitting soldiers. It creates more burst and especially poke damage. But we want to maximize Azir's DPS potential to become the ultimative teamfight god, or simply the Emperor of Shurima. That's what AttackSpeed Azir aims at. But what does it take to optimize the DPS? It's the combination of several multipliers that set the DPS, and we, as the player, can influence several levers within the DPS formula. For ADCs, this is the combination of attack damage, attack speed, armor penetration, crit chunks and crit damage that lets them shred everything. Azir cannot crit with his soldiers, but he has other benefits instead. First off, Azir deals magic damage. That's important to note because in general it is harder to stack a lot of magic resistance in League of Legends than just stacking armor. Also, all ranged champions don't get any bonus magic resistance from levels. Second off, Azir's soldier attacks pierce through several targets, which means that it is heavy area of effect damage. You know that Twitch who just wrecked your team? That's basically Azir with his Sand Soldiers. Also, he doesn't even need to use an ultimate for this. And thirdly, getting all 3 soldiers up increases his DPS by 50%. That's pretty huge. We need a certain mixture of stats to receive an optimized DPS voucher. It is ability power, attack speed, cooldown reduction and magic penetration. Reaching the cooldown reduction cap of 40% is a mandatory goal for Azir, no matter what build you run on him. By also skilling Azir's W Arise after his Q Conquering Sands, we get quicker all of Azir's soldiers up. The need of magic penetration is fulfilled with the purchase of a Void Staff. What's left is the relation between Azir's on-hit damage and the amount of on-hits he can do per second. But how much ability power and how much attack speed do we exactly need to get the maximum DPS voucher? This is hard to precisely evaluate because the optimal mixture of ability power and attack speed for the maximum DPS at the moment in the game does constantly change due to Azir's level benefits. For once, he gains a static 1.5 attack speed per level, and secondly, Azir's Sand Soldiers get automatically a certain amount of base damage from just leveling up. From level 1 to level 9 his Sand Soldiers get 5 bonus magic damage, and from level 10 to level 18 they get 10 bonus magic damage. But the real struggle lies within the itemization. As you all know, you cannot just spend your gold on a certain amount of ability power or attack speed. For example, if I want to buy 35 ability power and 50 bonus attack speed right now when I recall, one ability power has the gold voucher of 21.75 and one bonus attack speed has the gold voucher of 30. Therefore, 35 ability power and 50 bonus attack speed have together a gold voucher of 1211.25, and for whatever reasons I have exactly 1211.25 gold left right now. But I don't get my 35 ability power and 50 bonus attack speed, because I can only buy certain packages of stat combinations. In this case I could purchase a blasting wand for 860 gold, which gives me 40 ability power, so it's actually more ability power than I wanted, but I get no attack speed. Or I could buy an amplifying tome and a dagger for 885 gold, which gives me together 20 ability power and 50 bonus attack speed, and I could use the spare money for some extra health potions. This imaginary blue graph represents the most optimal DPS, but due to itemization issues, we can never actually reach this state. We can only try to balance around it. We can be a bit above the graph by investing in more ability power, or a bit under the graph by investing in more attack speed. More ability power, therefore better burst or poke damage, or more attack speed and therefore better DPS. That said, there is another very important question which arises. Do we even want to optimize our DPS for the early and mid game? That's an interesting question, and to answer this, I want to look at certain types of damage. With types of damage, I don't mean if it's physical, magical or true damage. I'm talking about the way the damage is applied. Damage in League of Legends can occur in different shapes. For example, a combo mage like Veigar is gated by high cooldowns on his spells. He unloads his full burst rotation once on a target, and then he backs and waits for his cooldowns to come up again. If we try to visualize his damage output, it would likely look like big waves where he does his burst damage, but then rapidly drop to an area where he does only very low damage with his basic attacks, which obviously don't do much damage when you build ability power. The other form of damage is sustained damage. For example, every ADC in the game is supposed to deal constantly high amounts of damage. Visualizing this, there would be a lot of waves which represent each basic attack. The overall damage of sustained damage is much higher, but the burst damage type has the surprise factor and favors short trades. Why do you think do ADCs usually buy a lot of attack damage first at the beginning of the game before they start to build attack speed and so on? It's because you have a lot more skirmishes in the early and mid game, which means a lot of short raids where raw attack damage simply outshines the attack speed. Attack speed scales over time in a fight. It is a necessary component to achieve high late game DPS, and it works the best in big team fights where you have a frontline that locks the target down for your carries. It's the same story for Azir as well, and that's why I prefer to prioritize the core AP items over the attack speed items in my build. Now then, let's go over the AttackSpeed Azir build. First item, mana regeneration. First item, mana regeneration? Not quite. I show you two item builds and you can decide which one you pick, because AttackSpeed Azir's mana usage is by no means as heavy as APC Azir's is. You can play without a mana regeneration item and reach important power spikes earlier in the game, although it definitely requires you to play accordingly around it. I recommend to not use Q Conquering Sands for the sake of farming minions and to buy a second Durance ring during the laning phase. Azir's mana costs are overall very low, but his Q has 75% higher mana cost than his W. And many times Azir players themselves by just Q Conquering Sands through the environment without any clear direction. Especially because you have naturally more attack speed than the APC Azir, you have it a lot easier to just wave clear with your Sand Soldiers auto-attacking the minions. The attack speed build without any mana regeneration item gets its 40% cooldown reduction from Nacer's Tooth and 9 scaling cooldown reduction glyphs. Our first purchase is the Stinger. The Stinger is Azir's first spike in power, as this item gives him so much stats for so less gold. Because of Azir's passive, the Stinger has a gold efficiency of 151%. This item in itself can be considered as core for AttackSpeed Azir. After the Stinger, we want some raw ability power and more cooldown reduction. Fiendish Codex should be considered as the next buy together with the tier 1 boots. Now it gets a little bit tricky. The upgrade into Nacer's Tooth costs us 850 gold and we get 10% attack speed and 30 ability power in return. 10% attack speed and 30 ability power have a gold voucher of 952.5, so even although Azir cannot use Nacer's Tooth's passive with his Sand Soldiers, the upgrade into Nacer's Tooth is still gold efficient. But that doesn't mean that we have to invest into Nacer's Tooth right now. More importantly is that we get the magic penetration on board, so that our DPS stays relevant, no matter if our opponents build magic resistance. That's why I prefer to go for the Void Staff first, then finish my Nacer's Tooth to get more pocket slots and stats, and then I upgrade my boots into the Berserker Greaves. The Berserker Greaves are an excellent choice on DPS Azir and scale better than the Sorcerer Shoes into the later stages of the game. At this point, we just want heavy ability power, and no item is better for this than Rabadon's Death Cap. The fifth item is Runen's Hurricane, the single item with the highest amount of attack speed. The 70 bonus attack speed bring Azir's scaling on another level and they are a tremendous boost for his DPS. Lastly, an optional item. I recommend Luden's Echo to push Azir's DPS to the maximum. Nacer's Tooth, Berserker Greaves, Void Staff, Rabadon's Death Cap, Runen's Hurricane, Luden's Echo, and Azir has 529 ability power and 2.215 attack speed. His 3 soldier DPS is now 1619, which increases to 1692 magical damage per second with the right masteries. If you like to run the build with a mana regeneration item, you basically just buy either an Azines or a Morellos before Nacer's Tooth and go for the rest of the attack speed build except of the Luden's Echo at the end. Runes are 9 attack speed marks, 3 attack speed quints, 9 armor seals and 9 scaling cooldown reduction glyphs. Mastery is the usual APC tree. The important masteries are Double-Edged Sword, Expose Weakness, Archmage and of course Havoc. Now let's do a comparison between the APC Azir and the DPS Azir. The APC Azir build is usually a Rabadon's Death Cap, Void Staff, Luden's Echo, Sonya's Hourglass, Azines and the CDR boots. The stats are 711 ability power and 1.09 attack speed. His on-hit damage is 596 and his 3 soldier DPS is 981.97. DPS Azir deals 65% more damage per second than APC Azir, but APC Azir deals 22% more damage on hit. Thanks for watching and have a good day.